everyone. Welcome to our session. My name is Ayca Bas. I'm a cloud developer advocate at Microsoft. My colleague Dan is joining me for the session as well. Hi, Dan.
Hey, Ayca, great to be with you. I'm also on the same team as Ayca in the cloud developer advocacy, and we're going to talk about building on the Microsoft Cloud and adding audio video calling from custom apps into a Teams meeting. A lot of good stuff to talk about, right, Ayca?
Yeah, exactly. Before we jump into the demos and all the good stuff, can you quickly explain us what is audio and video calling and how we can integrate that into a custom app and start connecting with Teams?
Sure. I think we're all used to calling friends or family using different devices and audio video calling techniques. But what if I could actually call Ayca from a custom app? Now, probably I wouldn't do that just for fun. We would do it for maybe a customer service scenario, or maybe a help desk scenario, or many, many other scenarios where you need one or more people to be able to talk directly. And by using the technologies Ayca and I are going to talk about here, you can actually do this in your own custom apps. And we're going to be talking about doing this using services across the Microsoft Cloud. So let's jump into the official agenda. And what we're going to do is start off with a demo where we're going to show this audio video calling and how it actually looks like from the standpoint of the custom app. But we're actually going to be calling into a custom Teams meeting that's set up. So we'll use Teams to actually have that communication with, in this case, a customer. Now, once we do that, we're going to talk about how we can go through and integrate Azure Communication Services into this. Ayca is going to walk us through setting up an ACS, Azure Communication Services resource. And then I'll jump into how we can use what she does in a custom React app. Now, there's a little more to the story, though, right, Ayca? What else are we going to cover?
Yes, exactly. So until this point, you will definitely understand how you can set up ACS resources and integrate with your React app. But then we will start understanding more how we can dynamically integrate with a Teams meeting. Basically, instead of copying and pasting a Teams link, you can automatically get a Teams meeting link by using Microsoft Graph. So I'm going to quickly show you how you can integrate that with Graph in your app. And in the final part, then would you like to walk us through what you're going to show?
Yeah, from there, we're going to talk about how we can actually dynamically get a token, and we're going to be using Azure Functions for this. As we get into this earlier, Ayca is actually going to show us how we can get a token for development purposes to try things out really quickly. But obviously, in a real app, you're going to want to do that dynamically. So I'll walk you through how to do that as well.
Awesome.
So from here, what we're going to do next is jump on into an actual demo, and I'll show you how this actually works. And I'm going to kick it off on my machine, but Ayca is going to be in a Teams meeting and be able to answer this call. So the way this is going to work, Ayca, is I'll launch a React app that's on my local machine here. Obviously, we would publish this somewhere, probably up to Azure, an app service, or Azure Static Web Apps, or something along those lines. But then, as you mentioned, Ayca, you're going to be talking about how we can actually use Azure Functions to have Microsoft Graph set up a meeting, right?
That's right. Yes. So after we learn how to connect with ACS through our React app, the next step will be creating Azure Functions and integrating Microsoft Graph to dynamically create a Teams meeting link. So we don't have to go to Teams, create a new meeting, and copy paste the link. And that will be really easier to do that through our React app. So I will show that part. And then we will be connecting to Teams and your React app.
Yeah. And then we're not going to go into the deployment, but obviously, since this is a React app, Azure Static Web Apps would be great, or maybe use containers. You could use Azure Container Apps or one of our other options in Azure. But let's jump into the actual demo itself and take a look at how we can actually use this audio video calling and then call into you who are going to be in a Teams app, which is pretty cool. So let me jump on over, and we're going to be walking you through the code. But before we do that, let me go ahead and run off to React here. And this is just local, you'll notice. But the first thing it does is gets a Teams meeting link And what this is going to do is add a calendar item. Now, Ayca is going to be talking about that momentarily, so I don't want to steal her thunder at all. So what I want to do for now is show you that I can actually turn on another camera. So let me go ahead and turn one on here. And this will be not as great of a camera, but it'll work. And you can kind of see all my setup here, I suppose. But this is what the customer would see. And from here, they can not only do their camera, but they can also choose their mic. And now when I choose start call, I'm going to be added into a lobby. Now let's move over to Ayca's screen and see what she would see from here.
Awesome. More exciting part. When Dan hit refresh to the React app, I actually received a meeting invite just a few seconds ago. That means that a customer is requesting a call with me as a customer agent. So I can hit join. And as you can see, my camera is here. I will mute myself to reduce echo, and I will join the meeting and see what happens. Here, I'm expecting to see Dan, actually, because he requested a meeting as a guest. I can admit and let him in the meeting. We can start our customer conversations. If he struggled with anything, he can ask me since I'm the support engineer here. And we can have our meeting. I can join the meeting through Teams, and he can join the meeting through React. And we can basically consume Teams meeting link in the background, but then we'll never know.
That's right. That's right. Which is really cool. Now I'm going to go ahead and hang up here, Ayca. So I don't want to be rude, but I'm going to let you go. And now that we've covered that, let's go ahead and why don't you walk us through how would we even get started with some of this? Because I know we need to have not only a nice demo and some code, but we probably need some Azure resources, right? So let's walk through creating the Azure Communication Services resource.
Exactly. So before we jump into more exciting parts, like integrating this into Azure, we first need to understand how we can create this resource on Azure and how we can get started learning about ACS in the first place. So I have really short demo for you, one for to show how we can create ACS resource on Azure, and the second one is just to walk you through the UI library ACS provide us. Let's jump right in and learn hands-on. I'm on Azure portal, and mainly I will walk you through how you can create Azure Communication Services. It's nothing different than any other resource. You can go to create a resource and type communication service, and then in the marketplace, you will be directed to the Azure Communication Services. You can click on Communication Services and hit Create. Then you will be creating your ACS from scratch. You can create a new resource group, like new ACS resource, hit OK, and you can call your resource anything you like. And then the only thing you have to do is hit review and create. I don't want to keep you waiting, so I already created an ACS resource. Let's quickly take a look how ACS resource look like. When you create your resource, it will look exactly like this. And the only thing you will have to do is create identity and user access token by just going to the related tab in the settings. You can create voice and video calling, or you can create chat. You can create both of them at the same time, according to your needs. In our demo, we actually use voice and video calling. Another exciting thing I want to show you is the UI library Azure Communication Services provide. In the UI library, let's quickly go to the overview. We have the full documentation for you if you're interested in learning more about the composites components that ACS provides you. You don't actually have to worry about the UI and how you will give the same experience as Dan did in the React app. You can basically consume all the composites and components available in the UI library. Let me quickly walk you through the call composites. For example, I will go through the basic example. First of all, you will see the documentation available here. You can go through the documentation and build the same experience as we did in the React app. If you want to test out the basic example of call composite, you can go to the preview, and preview will provide you some controls. If you just copy paste the related information like identifier token and then a URL for meeting invite, then you will find the same experience that you can integrate in your React app. Let's try out and see how it looks like. In my ACS resource, I first need to generate voice and video calling. I will create generate by selecting voice and video calling. And then I will quickly copy paste my IDs and see how the call composite will look like. I will copy the identity, paste it here. I will copy the access token, paste here. I will also change the name as my name. I'm using desktop at the moment, but if you're using mobile, you can also select mobile experience here. The only thing left is the URL to invite other participants to the call. So what I need to do is basically I need to create a meeting and get a link to share. And I have to paste the meeting link in the call composite. So I will paste the meeting link here. The moment I paste the link here, I will actually start seeing the experience right in here. It actually looks exactly the same as Dan showed us. I can turn on my camera and you can see me here. I can also unmute myself, but it will cause an echo, so I won't do that. You can start the call. So you can see me here and I can leave the meeting. So here, what we learned is we learn how to create ACS resources, and then next step we will learn how you can integrate your ACS experience in your React app. And to do that, I also walk you through how you can leverage from the UI libraries as we did in our demo. And next steps I will hand over to Dan, and he will walk us through how we can integrate that ACS experience he showed us in the demo.
Excellent. Thanks for walking us through all of that, Ayca. Really good stuff there. Super easy to set up the resource and even try this out without writing any code. But at some point, you're going to want to add this to your custom apps. And that's what we're going to talk about now. So let me switch over to my project here, and we'll have some links for you towards the end. So if you want to get to this code, you can also try it out. And one of the first things I want to mention is if I go to my package.json, you're going to notice I have these two packages highlighted: Azure Communication Common and Azure Communication React. Now, those packages are being used in my kind of initial page, my app.tsx here. You'll notice right up top here, here's Communication Common, and we're grabbing a token credential, a user identifier. And then from the Communication React, this is really the one that's doing all the UI that Ayca just showed. We have what's called a call composite. Now, this is adding everything from the buttons that you see to the ability to see the video, choose your camera, choose your mic. All those fun things are included with this. And then we have some helper functions here. One of these is a hook, for example, that I'll walk you through. Now, moving on down, what I want to do is kind of break this up into a kind of a step-by-step look at what we're doing. So if I were to break this out, and let me just put comments here, we'll say step one. And you'll notice that Copilot, by the way, is trying to help me out here. Get the ACS user identity and token from an Azure function. And that is true, actually. So I'll just hit tab. That's good enough. But we're doing a little bit more than that. We're setting the display name to guest. When we did the demo earlier, when I was admitted to the lobby, Ayca admitted me, but I came in as guest. Obviously, if you knew the logged in user's name, you could put that here. But the other important parts are what Ayca just showed. Remember, she copied in the user identity, the token, and the Teams meeting link. Well, that's the three items that you see right here. We're going to do that a little more dynamically, though, as we continue throughout this session. The other thing we have is the ability to set a message. So when the app first loaded towards the top, it would say something like getting the Teams meeting link and some other messages. But other than that, really, these items right here are the key players. So that's kind of the step one, is we need some variables, if you will. In this case, we're adding some state to our React app. Now, moving on down, if I were to say what's step two, well, Ayca earlier, she went in and added the identity, and the token and copy and pasted that. And again, you could do that. You could actually copy and paste those right here, but we want to do this a little more realistically. So we're just going to say create the token. We'll keep it simple. And you'll notice here that I'm in React using use memo. And what this will do is some caching techniques and make sure that this is done one time. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the token from up here, pass it into our Azure Communication Token credential. Now, if I go back up, that came from the package that I mentioned earlier. And then that's going to create our token that we need. Now, that credential then is going to be used along with the other items like the display name, the Teams meeting link, and that's all done here in our call adapter args. And so if I were to put a step 3, we would create the call adapter. And what that takes is, as you can see, the user ID, the display name, the credential, which is really the token. And then where is this meeting? Are we calling to another custom app? Because you can do that with ACS. Or are we calling to a Teams meeting link? Well, we're calling to a Teams meeting, obviously. So we're going to give it that Teams meeting link that was up here. Now that just encapsulates those 4 items into this particular object literal. Where the magic really happens is right here, though. We're going to use a little hook that's provided by Azure Communication Services called Use Azure Communication Call Adapter. And we're going to feed it those 4 pieces of data, those 4 properties. Now, the next part, Ayca and I are going to walk you through, and that's how to dynamically get the Teams meeting link, the identity and the token and all of that. But we're going to come back to that in a moment. You'll notice some fetch calls, though. That handles that part. But for now, what I want to show you is this is all it took to actually render the calling interface. And so there's that call composite. That automatically adds the audio video capabilities for you. So really, really easy. And there are other props we can add. In this case, I'm just adding the adapter. And again, the adapter is simply those 4 items that we talked about up here: the user ID, the display name, the credential, and the locator, which is the Teams meeting link in this case. So that's an example of how you can get started using some of the packages that are available, setting up the state, creating the call adapter args, and then using the call composite. Now, as I mentioned, though, there's a little more to the story because we need to dynamically set up that Teams meeting in the calendar. We need to dynamically get the token, all of that, which is going to be in here. So let me turn it back over to Ayca, who's going to walk us through how we can actually dynamically set up the Teams meeting link.
Awesome. So far until here, you can actually find the event code resources and the documentation in the UI library. Next step for us is dynamically create a Teams meeting URL with Microsoft Graph so that it will be more realistic. We don't have to copy paste the meeting link as I did in the UI library. We can auto-generate the meeting link, and then our customer and the agent can join the meeting using the Microsoft Teams invite. Okay, so let's quickly go back to code, and I will continue from where Dan left off. As you see, Dan already showed us how we can connect with the ACS and integrate the ACS UI library using the components. Next step for us is calling Azure function to get meeting link. It's already commented out here. So to call Azure functions, as you can see here, we define the Azure function URL in the env file. Let's quickly go to that .env file and check what is the URL for our Azure function. As you can see, we are actually calling localhost 7071 API Teams meeting function. That means that we actually have 2 different parts in our app. The first one is the React app that Dan showed us in the app.tsx. And the second one is actually the server side. We write using Azure Functions and TypeScript. We have 2 different functions here. I will walk you through how you can use functions using Team to get the Teams meeting invite. And then also we'll walk you through how you can do the same thing for ACS token. When basically Dan hits the localhost, it auto-generates the meeting link for me, and it actually triggers the Azure function. Let's go to the Azure function and see what we're doing in the function. So here, we have a very simple function. What we mainly do is we call the Microsoft Graph, and to do that, we are actually scheduling Azure function. Whenever we hit the HTTP trigger, we are calling Azure function, and it is basically calling this function, create new meeting link. And we are getting this create new meeting link function from the shared graph. It's already in here. First thing we have to do is integrating authentication so that we can call Microsoft Graph. And we already did that by using app-only authentication. And if I scroll down, we can find create new meeting async function here. To create new meeting, we basically need to create start time, end time. After we define start time and end time, we need to create the event content by defining the subject, defining the start time, end time, and making sure that we highlight this as online meeting. So this event will generate a Teams meeting invite. You can also use online meeting endpoint and graph, but since we want to have a calendar invite in addition to the online meeting URL, we use the event endpoint. Here, the only thing you have to do is basically call the graph client and create the new meeting, basically posting the new meeting by using the event details we define here. And that's all. When we go back to the function will only return the URL, meaning we don't have to actually have all the details about the invite. The only thing our ACS app, the React app, needs from the ACS is the join URL. So in the body, we only return meeting, online meeting, join URL, so that our ACS can consume the same meeting link, and our agent can also use the same link to join the meeting. That's about it. And we also have the similar function for getting the ACS token, and I will hand it over to Dan for to walk us through how we can dynamically create that.
Excellent. So I think it's first off, Ayca, pretty exciting that we can dynamically set up the calendar event, and it's not that hard to do actually to get started with that. But as you mentioned, in addition to that, we also need ACS, and specifically the calling component, to be able to get that token and user identity that we talked about. So we could hard code it. Probably not a good idea, right? So we're going to talk about, as Ayca mentioned, how we can dynamically do this with an Azure function. So let me switch back over to the code. And Ayca just walked you through getting the Teams meeting link. Here's where that fetch call is made. And then we simply set that data up into our state that I showed a little bit earlier, right up top here, into the Teams meeting link. But recall that we also have this user ID and token that is needed for the call adapter args. Where are we going to get those values? Because right now you can see the state is just empty strings for all of these. Well, if I go into the same area Ayca was just in, and we go into the ACS token function, let me open up index.tsx, and you'll see this is actually very straightforward, not a lot of code. The first thing I've done is reference the Azure Communication Identity package that we have installed. And what I'm going to do is run in and grab the connection string also from an environment file. Now, that's something Ayca showed earlier, the resource, and you can get the connection string from your Azure Communication Services resource in the Azure portal. And so I'm just simply going to an env file I have, I'm grabbing that, and we're going to be using that so that we can get the token and the user identity. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to use this communication identity client and feed it that connection string. All right. In essence, we're authenticating, if you will, to the ACS resource so that we can get the token and the user identity. Now, this gives us a token client, and that can be used to do the two things we need. We need to create a user identity. So we do that with create user, and we need the voice over IP ability. So we call get token, and that gets us the token. Now from here, we're going to send back that user ID, and then this flattening out this spread operation here of user token is simply going to return token and the value of the token back. Now that call is actually made with this fetch right here. So we're going to give it the API to call from also an environment variable. And then we're going to parse that JSON and get back that user ID and the token. And we're going to set those up into our state. And there you have it. So now we have all the major pieces. We have the React portion with the state. We now know how to fill all of these state variables with data. Ayca showed how to get the Teams meeting link. I just walked you through how we can get the user ID and the token by using a separate Azure function. Now, there's a lot more we could talk about, right, Ayca? But this gives us a nice starting point, I think, for people to get started with this. So, Ayca, do you want to walk through how can people get more information about this type of content?
For sure, yes. So we have a lot of resources for you if you're interested in diving in. And if you're more interested in Microsoft Cloud integration scenarios, like this one we showed you, ACS, React, Microsoft Teams, we have a lot of those available under aka.ms/Microsoft-Cloud. If you're interested in specifically for this demo, we actually have a tutorial for you. You can go to aka.ms/mscloud-acs-teams-tutorial. Then you will find a tutorial. You can go through step by step and build the same experience as we did in this React demo. We also have Cloud Samples repo available. You can find more samples there. It is under github.com/Microsoft/Microsoft Cloud. And finally, as you remember, I showed ACS UI library earlier. If you're interested in diving into the documentation, trying the preview by just copying and pasting the ID, token, and Teams URL, then you can quickly go to the UI library in the link and start learning about ACS. That's pretty much it we can cover today. We obviously have a lot of resources for you to try by yourself hands-on, and let us know how you find the tutorial. If you're interested in learning more, feel free to connect us from the social. Thanks so much, everyone, for watching.
Thanks, everyone. Hope you get a chance to try this out.